Welcome to the Pull the Chute podcast with Jeff and Jana. This is our weekly venture into the world of small to medium-sized businesses and the entrepreneurial spirit that drives success.
So our goal here is to help you grow and to be the best you can be, both in business and personally. To do that, we identify and we discuss topics that will hopefully help you as you work to build a successful business.
We also interview business owners and executives. It's our hope that you may be able to gain insight on ways to help you be a better leader and provide a better culture for your people.
Our mission here is to help you pull the chute once a week to work on your business instead of always working in your business.
So we hope you find these discussions insightful, helpful, and useful.
And thanks for your support. We hope you enjoy today's podcast.
Well, welcome everyone to the Pull the Chute podcast with Jeff and Jana. As always, we're so excited that you are here. Jana, welcome. How are you today?
I am good today. Jeff and I did a long, wonderful kind of symposium yesterday where we got to hear a lot of keynotes and a lot of people's stories, a lot of business people in the room. So we had a good time.
Yeah, it was.
Back at it.
Yeah, right. Well, it was interesting too because they had us doing, it was very interactive. Like we did a couple meditations through different speakers, and they really got us thinking about things. And I love those kind of summits and conferences. I think they're great. They're great. But speaking of that too, we have a wonderful guest today. I have Abby Martin here. She's with Ampleo, and they do a lot of deep diving on stuff. I think we're going to learn that maybe, but with your company and client. But Abby, welcome to the show. We appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you all for having me. So
Abby, do us a favor. We always like to do this for our listeners. Just give us a little bit of brief background about you, and then talk about Ampleo and how you got.
Yeah, you got it. So I spent close to 2 decades in in-house HR. So it sounds exactly like, it's not a term most people use it, but I equated a lot to the legal field. So in-house HR, meaning I was part of an HR team within an organization. Have really loved that experience. The bulk of that time, 13 years of it, was actually at Google. So
wow, how far is that?
Big really learned the ins and outs, learned how to build a people strategy from some of the best, learned, on the forefront of most things when it comes to building out a valuable employee experience. I feel very fortunate to have been there and part of that. I decided back in 2021, right? The whole world changed.
Right. Good time.
I was a little tied to Google, as most people are. It was a very hard place to leave. And at the time I was actually remote. So I started at Google in Mountain View in the headquarters. I had relocated to Southern California, where I currently am now. So I was considered a remote employee, which at the time was like quite the exception, right?
Yeah.
So I was very tied to Google because I felt like that was the best gig in town. And so then things changed in 2021 and people were open. Like I had more opportunities to get in and lead HR teams and be part of the strategy setting and not just strategy execution. So I took it and ran with it. I left Google in November of 2021. Didn't get too far out from Google because 2 ex-Googlers recruited me to run HR for a startup that they were at. But I felt really good going with them and following them. So went to that startup. Was there about 6 months. So very quick time. But I paid my dues at that startup. That's for sure, and learned a lot in that 6 months. And then went to another company. Was there just over a year, all with kind of the end game of like, I want to collect some experiences outside of Google, outside of the big corporate America, and really just understand the small business and the intricacies and how things had changed. Cause I had started in the small business world, early in my career. So just tried to round that experience out and went out on my own in March of 2023. Was on my own for a couple months, introduced to Ampleo, who at the time was providing fractional CFO, controller, and accountants. Joined forces with them and have started building out the HR division, and just am really loving it. The amount of flexibility, the challenges that I'm able to help business leaders with, and just the passion that these founders have that we get to work with is just unlike anything in corporate America or larger companies, I mean, you can see the blood, sweat, and tears on these leaders that you're working with, and they care so much. And it's a great partnership to come in and just help them with their people strategy when they are so invested in what it is that the company's doing, because it's been their baby and their brainchild.
Totally get that. So is there a certain size that Ampleo likes to work with as far as companies go?
Yeah, good question. So on the finance and marketing side, I would say typically I think they're pretty revenue based, right? Like a certain amount of revenue is when you need to pull in a marketing executive, or once your books get complicated enough, you need a finance. On the HR side, I would say it's more employee size.
Okay.
So I would say really at that 25 person mark is when the role of a strategic HR partner, when that really could come in and start taking things off of the plate of the founder. That's when I usually hear is the tipping point. That's like, I'm spending so much time with employee issues and coaching and hiring and looking at comp. And so that seems to be a tipping point. But, the beauty of the fractional model is you can get that really great skill set and partner as a leader, but not have to pay someone full time.
Right.
That's really kind of been the bread and butter for us and has been fantastic. And then we just turn it up and down as we need, like as they potentially get through funding or they have a growth phase, we can start bringing in other pieces to the team and just helping build out that employee life cycle.
Yeah.
So what is a typical business that would hire Ampleo? I mean, do you guys have, I'm sure you have certain market segments that are more suited to this than others.
Yeah, good question. So on the HR side, I would say we're pretty industry agnostic, right? Like there are the usual suspects that every workforce needs in place to be successful. You need, a strategic vision that everyone can align their work with. You need recognition and reward programs. You need managers that know what they're doing, clear roles and responsibilities. So that is pretty industry agnostic, I would say. And that's a great question, Jana. And I get that a lot. Like, do y'all have experience in healthcare? Now, don't get me wrong. There are some industries where it's like, we don't have anyone with experience in that. I don't want to touch it. Right. Like government contracts currently on our roster. We don't have government contracting experience in HR, and that's just a different beast. So I would never put anyone in a situation where I don't feel like we can add value. But I would say for most of the industries that are out there, we have someone on our consultant team who has experience. And that's been intentional when we've been recruiting and building out our support team, is trying to get a wide breadth of industry experience.
Sure.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Your sweet spot is like where Jen and I like to be too, is like once they get to that 25, there's emerging leaders that are coming up.
Yeah.
And it's really important that we train them and develop them and show them how to be a leader at that point. And it's funny because we always talk to the business owners and we're like, you're going to really need this. And they're like, yeah, but I really want them to do this. And I go, what you don't understand is that if you spend a little bit of time and effort now, it's going to make your life so much easier as you move forward.
So much easier. Yeah, that's for sure what I tell leaders too. Like I'll give recruiting as an example. It's much easier to build a recruiting operations plan, right? What is our employer brand? Where are we looking for candidates? How are we assessing them? How are we selecting them? How are we paying them? It's much easier to build that at 25 when you're not hiring like crazy than it is when you have 15 roles open. And that's what your recruiting and HR team is focused on. So I'm with you, Jeff. Like it is such a key moment to just make that, investment to get the scaffolding in place. It just works. It just makes.
And there's that tipping point, right? Because it's a lot of times the company will hit that hockey stick curve and they just explode. And if they don't have the training, is the biggest thing I think about sometimes for what you do, right? They don't have any kind of training in place or all that. They're just scrambling.
Yeah.
And, easy to throw people at it, but it's costly to throw people at it.
Right? It is. And, it's funny that you say that because there are some roles where it's true. Somebody is better than nobody in the role. Yeah. But there are also, in fact, roles where nobody is better than somebody. You got to be able to figure out, like, this might be a nobody role. Like, let's not have someone come in and, like,
Yeah.
jacking up that we got to clean up. Like, let's just leave it nobody until we're ready to hire someone. And
Yeah.
the other thing that I see at 25, and curious if y'all see this on your side as well, is that's really when I start seeing the division of roles starting to take place. So, as I'm thinking about org design, it's like, okay, you've had a really great product leader who's doing merchandising and inventory and product design and wearing lots of hats, because that's the beauty of a small company, right? And they were loyal to you and you're being loyal to them. But now a couple of things have happened. Number one, the role has outgrown them, right? What's needed on the merchandising and demand planning side is probably not their skill set. They came in as something else. So it's time to bring in an expert, but it's also time for them in the, let's say, product design role. It's time for them to go deep in that role, right? So it's kind of just that whole idea of like, when do we need specialists and when do we need generalists? And I would say in that 25 spot, that's where we start talking about it. We start having the conversations and putting the boxes together. And, if org design, I'm a big stickler of, hey, let's build your boxes. I don't want to hear a single name. Don't give me anyone's name. We're just talking about boxes right now. And then once we get the boxes figured out, then it's like, okay, do we have the names to go in the boxes, or do we need to train people up? Do we need to hire people? Do we need to get this on the plan for next year? So that's
that's a great visual to have the boxes and then to put the people in. We
talk
about butts and seats. Like, okay, here's your seat, and if you have the wrong butt in it, you're gonna struggle. You got to make sure. You got to make sure you got the right butt.
Yeah, that's interesting too, because I was thinking about that as you were talking, Abby. It's like, okay, you put the people in the boxes. Are we working with the people to say, is this where you want to excel? Or as the owner, are you just putting people in boxes?
Yeah, it's a
big difference.
Great question. It's a little bit of both. I would say up front, the groundwork that typically makes for a more productive workforce is to build the boxes. And the boxes include, what is this function responsible for? Like, okay, this is my finance box, and they're required, they're doing AR, they're doing forecasting, they're doing X, Y, and Z. And then I've got my, I've got my
creative team.
I've got my product design team. Yeah. And so figuring out what each function is and what they need in order to kind of capture all of the tasks that are in their, in their remit, that's where what you're talking about, Jeff, comes in. It's like, okay, we have some people that are really interested in social media and they want to build that skill set, but it's like, okay, do we have someone who can lead them, who can mentor them? Like, do we have someone at a skip level who can bring them there? But it is a delicate dance of tucking in your top talent. I'm a big believer in Strengths Finder. I think that focusing on people's strengths is such a damn good way to get a productive team versus like, here are all the things you need to work on. Like, let's just figure out what they do well and let them do more of that if they like it. So I think that's where that balance comes in, Jeff, that you're asking about. Like, what is employee led versus what is employer led in the pieces of the org design.
And so
go ahead.
Sorry, Jenna. Do you find though that the struggle for the leadership then is to let go, because they're overseeing all this, right? And now they have to let go and trust that the person they're putting into the box
is going to do it,
and do it to their satisfaction.
Well, and have the passion.
You see,
have the same passion and investment.
Yes. So I do see it. And I usually like to solve those in tactical ways. So let's say like recruiting processes. A lot of times the CEOs, they like to look at every single resume, interview every single person. And that's great. That works for a while. But, you got to be able to scale that to the rest of the leadership team around you, to have your intuition and your same way that you think about candidates and think about new team members. So a way to get around them having to meet everyone is to introduce a offer review panel or offer review period. So once let's say someone wants to make an offer, it has to go to the CEO and the COO or who, like finance usually is pulled in for budgeting. And they take a look at like, what was the interview feedback? What are the references saying? Look at their resume, what they want to offer them. and give their stamp of approval that way so that they can see like, okay, my leaders can do this. They are bringing in top talent. Like they know what they're doing. And I find that with founders just processing the heck out of things sometimes, and not in a corporate way, right? Like you don't need to add like layers of hierarchy just for fun, but that is a good way to get leaders to kind of get their claws out of things sometimes, is if they feel like they still have,
Right.
the buck still stops with them.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Jenny, you had a question, or did I?
No, I think that was what I was going to say is
Okay.
how hands-on do they feel like they need to be, that leadership team again, but yeah.
So
and sometimes that's the truth telling with the leaders is like, which, I know I shared with y'all before we started. That's one of the things I love most about consulting is like, the CEO is not my boss anymore, right? Like
that's right.
They're hired me in to hear what I have to say. And sometimes I got to tell them like, get your claws out of this. Like,
yes,
they can do better than you. They've been doing this for a decade.
Yeah.
So just kind of reminding them of that too, and holding up the mirror sometimes can just get them going down the right path of trusting their leaders.
Yeah. So I want to go back. You said you worked at Google for a while. Of course, they're the leaders in anything and everything.
Yeah, really.
Right.
That's right.
They did it so right out in so many places. But Jan and I talk about communication amongst the four different generations now, right?
Yeah, big time.
And so
that's my thing.
What are some of the things that you learned at Google that has helped you kind of solve some of those issues, or has it, which you do today? I'd love to hear that.
So great question. I also spend a lot of time thinking about the different generations that we have in the workforce right now. And realizing that I'm not the youngest generation anymore, right? I look around, I'm like, wait a minute, what just happened? I'm not the youngest generation. I'm like checking my 401k balance, doing all the things that adults do. So when it comes to communication, one of the things I actually learned later in life was the concept of the platinum rule versus the golden rule. And that has been a big life changer for me. So think back to like, we all learned the golden rule, treat people how you want to be treated, right? It's very internally focused if you peel it back and think about it. Whereas the platinum rule is treat others how they want to be treated. So I think like, I think about my 4 kids. They all want to be treated. If they make a mistake, they all want to be treated very differently about that mistake. They want to talk about it right then, or they want me to give them some space, or they need some tough love, or they just need a hug. And so that can carry over into the workforce. And it definitely comes to play like you're talking about in the different generations. Like, there are a lot of themes that come out in how different generations want to be communicated with and want to be handled with certain situations and certain pieces of information. So I think going into the situations with the platinum rule in mind, and adapting communications and adapting style based on the audience is I've seen work really, really well.
Yeah, I think that's really good. And just knowing kind of the general overview of how that person has communicated. And this is what I talk about in my keynotes, because I give this keynote more than any other keynote. Everybody's wanting it right now. How do I work with a Gen Zer? How do I work with a baby boomer? How come, a millennial gets the management job over me or whatever?
Right.
It's very interesting. If you understand how all of these different generations grew up communicating, then it's a little bit easier to kind of zero in on what their comfort level is,
Yeah.
But you got to know what that is. And a lot of
got to know what that is. And I would take that whole concept of a platinum rule a step further. And when it comes to communication, one of the things that I often see get looked over when people are, rolling out people strategies, or, like, here's our performance management process, or here's our compensation philosophy, is even across different generations, there's still, personal motivators that have to be considered for each person. And I think really breaking it down to, hey, so-and-so, like, let's talk about what motivates you. Is it rewards? Is it financial rewards? Is it title? Is it challenges? Is it, X, Y, and Z? And in order to be a good manager, like, you really have to be able to know what those motivators are so that you can coach your teammate in the right way, and you can incentivize them in the right way. Like most of us are financially driven, but not everybody is, and not for every type of challenge. So getting back to your communication, sometimes like just thinking about like, what is the outcome I want from this communication, and what do I think is going to motivate each of these people either to buy into it or give feedback to it, is another way to dissect that challenge.
And win, and make sure that you're, again, respecting them. The younger generations want to be involved. They want to feel like they're heard, they're respected, all of that stuff. So it is interesting. It's great.
That's great. So going back to the Google question though, so was there certain things that in your career that they focused on to help you get to where you believe today? Or is this just you learning over all the years?
Oh, yeah. Yep. So
I'm pushing you a little deeper.
No, all good. So I wouldn't say that it was any one certain training or experience that I had at Google that got me to where I am today. Like, I am a big believer in the growth mindset. I actually just finished my master's in applied psychology at the ripe age of 43. And so I would just say, like, it's actually been the self-learning that I've done that has really informed my opinions more than any certain experience. And I think here's why, Jeff, to get to your question. I went through Google just like, you're in survival mode with 150,000 people. Like, you're just keeping up with Google news and like networking within Google. And so when I got out, it was like, oh, hold on. Like, wait, hold up. I got to like train myself now. And so that was part of the reason, I went back and got the master's and so I think it's a combination of, I have the academic background now as I've gotten older and spent more time investing on myself and my philosophies, that I now look back and think like, oh, that's why I did it that way, or that's why X, Y, and Z worked, or that's why, Laszlo or Todd Carlisle, these are some of the great managers that I had at Google. That's why they wanted us to do it in that order. So I've now married the experience I had with the education I've gotten on my own. And that's helped inform my opinion. So I think I did it backwards than most. Like, most people go get these great graduate degrees and then come to Google. And I was more like the school of hard knocks, learned it on my own, and then supplemented that with the academic background to help me understand why things worked the way they did.
And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I tell people, I got 30 plus years experience in dealing with entrepreneurs because I've been an entrepreneur that long, right? And so
exactly.
I leverage all that experience, the ups, the downs, the hardships, the celebrations, to me, that's the best learning.
It is. It's not, there's not one single like concept that I learned at Google or at anywhere that sticks out to me. It really is just the constant like challenging myself to learn more and read more and understand more, that I think just continues to help us be valuable partners on the people side, to also have that business acumen as well, to be true partners with our leaders.
Yeah.
So if a company is listening and they're in the 25 people range-ish, what are two things you could tell them to be watching out for before they pick up the phone to call you?
Yeah, well, start logging your time. Like, how much time am I spending on people issues or people initiatives that I could, bring in an expert to do and help me with what my blind spots are and help me navigate the landmines. That would be the first, is just to log the amount of time, and just think about, like, do you have any burning platforms? Do you have any data? Are people leaving? Are people turning down your offers? Are, people constantly asking you when they're getting their next raise, which means they don't understand how their compensation is determined. So logging your time and how much you as a leader are spending on people related issues or questions or, forward thinking. And then the second is like, just look around at your data. It's there in front of you. You'll be able to tell a story with it. And that's what we are going to do. First thing in the door is start looking at your data and supplementing like the quantitative with some qualitative that we've all been trained up to do and capture from meeting with employees. But yeah, those would be the two things.
Awesome.
And we would love to help. Yeah. Even if you don't think you have issues, even if everything's going great.
That's
and
right.
You're just growing and you just want it to be better, that's a great spot to start too.
I agree. So Abby, if people want to get a hold of you and call you in or talk to you at least, how do they do that?
Yep. So check out our website, ampleo.com, ampleo.com. I'm available at Abby, ABBY, at ampleo.com, and would love to chat with you. Shoot me an email. We can set up a time. We have some free resources that are available that I can send around assessing your people operations, and would love to get you on our newsletter. Awesome. And if you're interested, we also are hosting a growth summit in Salt Lake on October 10th that we would love for you to come to. Our LinkedIn page has more about that.
Great.
Wonderful. Well, Abby, thank you so much for being on the show. We really appreciate it. We're excited to hear how Ampleo is changing people's lives and businesses' lives. And that's what we're all about. We're all about, helping people be the best they can be, right? And so
I love it.
For success. So thanks for being
Well, thank you all for having me. I'm very honored to be a part of the show. Thank you.
Thank you. To all the listeners out there, as always, Jana and I love to hear from you. So Jana at janalandry.com, Jeff at pullthechute.net. Let us know how you're feeling about things. We love to get the emails and just to be able to reply back to you. So thanks. And until the next time, stay safe and be healthy.